At 10:30 on Friday the 7th of April, we boarded a JetBlue flight and flew to Fort Lauderdale. Since we arrived before the ship became available, we passed a few hours at the local casino before eventually boarding the ship. We had a super quick look around our accommodations and the ship, and then a brief emergency drill. And the ship departed Fort Lauderdale about 4:30 on the 8th. The Eurodam was headed for a 16-day Caribbean and Pacific cruise, including a Panama Canal transit, a first for the 8-year-old ship. The ship, built in Italy and launched by Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands, carried 1,900 passengers and 900 crew. So our first 2 days were at sea, and we spent time getting to know the ship and getting into its rhythms. At 86,000 tons and 935 foot in length, the ship was a reminder of how magnificent these modern ships can be. Loaded with art, great restaurants, and multiple entertainment spaces. It's easy to see how people can be seduced by this style of holiday. The crew was mostly Indonesian or Filipino, and they were uniformly pleasant and smiling. But before you knew it, we were in Aruba and taking the tour. Aruba is a small island, 20 miles long and 6 across, situated 18 miles north of the Venezuelan
To the left
coast.
side, ladies and gentlemen, we can see the Royal Plaza Shopping Mall.
It is part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands and has a population of just over 100,000. Originally colonized by Spain, it was purchased by Holland in 1636. The King of Holland appoints the governor of Aruba for 6 years. The per capita income of Aruba is amongst the highest in the Caribbean, driven by a successful tourist industry, which represents 3/4 of GDP. The island is flat, arid, and consistently warm. But that was enough of Aruba. We were heading out, and it was time to train the barman how to make a sidecar. Now we had another 2 days at sea, during which the partying continued and we studied the Panama Canal. But before you knew it, we were actually approaching it. The canal is a 48-mile-long waterway, employing locks at both ends to lift ships up to the level of the man-made Gatun Lake. The idea of a canal was first raised in 1534 by the King of Spain. Various abortive efforts followed, but the most serious was a French effort starting in 1881. That effort focused on a sea-level canal, but the French failure to master malaria led to 22,000 deaths and bankruptcy. Theodore Roosevelt assisted a rebellion by Panamanians to gain independence from Colombia, to the point of sending US warships to prevent Colombian troops from putting down the rebellion. In 1904, the US purchased the French equipment and took a series of actions aimed at addressing the deadly diseases which had defeated the French. Despite these actions, a further 5,600 workers died during the US project. The canal construction was completed in 1914, enabling ships to save 7,800 miles to reach either ocean. It cost the US the equivalent of $8 billion in today's money. In 1994, the Panama Canal was chosen as one of the 7 wonders of the world. Nice shot. Nice shot. I have it all. Today, more than 14,000 vessels traverse the canal each year, and since 1999, the canal has been controlled by the Panamanian government. But now it was time for us to head into the Pacific and get back to partying. But all of a sudden, we were dealing with Costa Rican tugboats. Costa Rica is an interesting country of 4.5 million people. Like all the Latin American countries we visited, one cannot help but be struck by the poverty and poor living conditions.
So the termite is gonna get the cellulose already processed to be digested.
Nevertheless, the Civil War of 1948 led to a stable democracy which has persisted for 14 presidential elections.
That one?
Yes.
That's a squirrel cuckoo. It's a parasite bird.
And which has created a remarkably egalitarian society, poor by US standards, but one of the highest standards in Latin America. High also in the Index of Human Development, which includes things like education. The country is also unusual in that it has no army. It's also notable for its remarkable standards of environmental progress, one of the highest in the world. But it was back to the ship and on to Nicaragua. Incidentally, the next day was Easter Sunday, so the day started with well-attended Mass in the large theatre. Nicaragua, in contrast to Costa Rica, is one of the poorest countries of Latin America, and that becomes obvious as soon as one gets on the road. A former Spanish colony, since independence in 1821, it's had multiple periods of dictatorship and fiscal collapse. It's had a very troubled 20th century, including occupation by US Marines in response to internal instability from 1909 to 1932, and most recently endured a revolutionary period from 1960 to 1990 between the long-standing corrupt Somoza regime and the Marxist Sandinistas. In Nicaragua, Margaret stayed home and I did a run to the former capital city of León, rebuilt after a series of earthquakes in 1610 destroyed the original location. León is the intellectual center of Nicaragua and is loaded with Spanish colonial structures, including over 30 churches. I visited the Cathedral of the Assumption, the largest church in Central America and a World Heritage Site. Then I wandered around for a while, and later was very impressed at our bus drivers' passing techniques. But it was the same poor housing that left the lasting impression on the way back to the boat. So again, before we knew it, we were dealing with Guatemalan tugboats, landing at the attractive port town of Puerto Gazelle. Guatemala is also a very poor country that has endured 2 centuries of turmoil, frequently assisted by mischief on the part of the US. Most recently, from 1960 to 1996, the country endured a bloody civil war between a US-backed government and leftist guerrillas, including genocidal massacres of the Maya population and widespread torture. Most of the human rights violations were carried out by government forces, and numerous former heads of state have been indicted or are under trial. Since the United Nations brokered peace agreement in 1996, Guatemala has made economic and democratic progress, but remains almost at the bottom of the human development criteria and heavily troubled by crime, drug trade and poverty. We visited the city of Antigua, a UNESCO World Heritage Site and former capital of the Kingdom of Guatemala. The city is famous for its well-preserved Spanish Baroque architecture and ruins of colonial churches. We also followed in the footsteps of Bill Clinton and visited the Jade Museum.
Close your eyes. It's not about looking at the jade, it's about feeling the jade. People think jade is green, it comes from China.
Finally, we did a little wandering around the attractive city in the 90-degree temperatures. And then headed back to the ship. Now we entered the final phase, which consisted of 3 ports in Mexico. We'd done Mexico before, and these were generally tourist traps, so apart from short visits ashore, we were more ship engaged in the final phase. We did do a submarine thing in Cabo San Lucas, which was quite enjoyable.
So every time, everywhere that I go, you guys see.
Oh my God! Move over, make room.
Look at the lady. Look at the lady inside that boat. She's very scared.
Yeah. But now, as the cruise wound down, the final 2 days into San Diego were consumed with an orgy of partying.
I had mattresses by the time I went to sing.
Try when the blood starts pumping, out on the street, the traffic starts jumping, folks like me on the job for a night.
And it was time to recall all those towel animals our room service had made for us.
Let's go play.